Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have Ruth Kedar with us today. She's the founder of Kedar Design. Ruth is a designer, an artist, a maker. You can go check her out on Insta, and she also has a website that you can check out all of her work. It's pretty cool. We're gonna talk about design in the age of AI nowadays, art, played around with a bunch of AI art applications, having a lot of fun nowadays, and everything Ruth has been up to as of late. Before we start, this podcast is presented to you by Podbuyer. My question to you is, have you ever suffered from a dry pipeline? It's pretty boring and depressing not to have leads as a business owner. SEO takes a bunch of time, ads are very costly, and cold email will get you in the spam. So why not start a podcast instead? Podcast that can generate up to 30 leads a month, can close 10% into clients with a follow-up system. And you have an agency, a consultant, me, that can help you do all of that. So go to podbuyer.com. We have a free ebook and a masterclass showing you how to start your own AI podcast. Ruth, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you've been up to as of late.
Oh, thank you, Charles. Thanks for having me. So I've been a designer for 4 decades and started in architecture. The trajectory is a little bit interesting. If you think we can expand on that a little bit. Born in Brazil, my parents decided to immigrate to Israel when I was 16. So into a new culture, completely different environment. I finished high school and went into architecture because that was something that I wanted to do for a very, very long time. It was very clear, though, very early on, that my interests actually lay in design much more than architecture, design as a broader discipline. And even though I could then kind of change and go into graphic design. At the time, I thought that that was a little bit limiting, and architecture would give me a much more broader and deeper education and foundation for me to do something else. And then I got really interested as in extracurricular. I was getting all the books then from the Basel School of Design, the Graphics Press, seeing what designers were doing. And I got really interested in information systems for architecture, which was not necessarily a field, but I felt like there was a need to translate buildings to the users. You know, user experience was not a term then, but it really felt to me that we architects at the time would design these exquisite buildings, had plans and cross sections and whatever. But when the user entered particularly big public buildings, it was really difficult to find your way around. So that was something that I wanted very much to do. And upon graduating, I went to architects to try to see if they would be interested in that. They really couldn't see it. So I couldn't get a job in architectural firms. So then I went to graphic design firms and they couldn't hire me because according to them, I was overqualified. They don't hire architects in graphic design firms. So I moved over a little bit and decided that the way for me to do what I wanted to do was actually start my own design firm. And that was how my first office design studio was created. And I did information graphics in Israel for about 5 years. I can't hear you.
You're known for designing the Google logo. Tell us the story behind that.
So after these 5 years that I was working in Israel, I still felt very much like, I was an autodidact, and I really felt that I was really missing a formal education in design, and that I was pulling myself by my own ponytail, a bit of a fraud. And so I was looking for interdisciplinary schools to do my master's in design. And there were two. There was MIT in Boston and Stanford in California. And, upon kind of looking at both of these, I decided that Stanford was a much better fit, and I ended up coming to Stanford and doing my master's in an interdisciplinary program between the art department and mechanical engineering product design. And when I finished when I graduated first, because I ended up doing a project, my master's projects on playing cards designs and not information designs at all, which was kind of my original plan. I think a lot of my path, my career path, is life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans, right? But I'm really very happy about taking those tortuous roads. But I ended up going to Adobe and starting there, doing some really interesting projects and technology and all of that. And then Stanford called me back to teach the graduate program of design and also some undergraduate studies. And while I was at Stanford, I was approached by Larry Page to create the Google logo. Now, the interesting aside from that is that it was not that they were doing their postdoc at Stanford. I was teaching at Stanford at the time, so you would think that the connection would be on Stanford grounds, but it wasn't. It was actually the nascent. Colonel here was at a Aikido dojo, and because I was, I've been training in Aikido for almost 40 years, and while I was in the dojo. And the dojo is also interesting because you train with everybody, and it's a very close knit community. However, we didn't know what anybody did outside of the confines of the dojo, right? And so it just so happens that I was sweeping the mat with somebody next to me, and he happened to hear somebody saying my full name, and he says, "Oh, you Ruth Kedar from Stanford, the Ruth Kedar who's been teaching," and etc. And we struck a conversation, and this led to a friendship. And at some point, he was the one who told me that he was at the Center for Design Research at Stanford doing his postdoc, and his colleagues, Larry and Sergey, were just founding this new company, and they were looking for a designer to design their logo. Would I be interested in talking to them? And of course, I'm always interested to talking to people who have problems to be solved. And I received a few days, perhaps later, an email from Larry Page that he wanted to meet up. And this is how it came to be. I had a conversation with them. They were actually looking at different designers. They were trying to find somebody who kind of understood what it is that they were looking for. And somehow the conversations that we had really resonated with them. And they thought that I would be the person to tackle this on. And this is how that happened.
It's a very cool story. How was Larry back then? Because it wasn't like the billionaire Larry. It was humble. Well, I mean, he's still humble, that guy, but I
Well,
think it was like pre-success, right? So
right, but
very different.
it was it was a handful. Google was a handful of employees, right? These were all young kids, fresh from grad school or from directly from undergrad with an idea. I found them incredibly charming, but also incredibly fearless, and they really felt that they had something that was really impressive, and that's something that was going to revolutionize at that time search, because search at that time was really, if you go back, they were, first of all, it's the nascence of the internet. Very few people are going to the internet to do kind of mundane jobs. At that time, it was primarily students, right? The young generation who is willing to take risks and embraces new technologies. And so at that time, the searches were all kind of for money, and it was very much a translation of the old yellow pages into the digital world, right? So if you wanted to have your business appear bigger than somebody else, you needed to pay more money, right? So that was kind of the business model. And they came in with this algorithm that actually it was how it's validated by the users who are using the service, right? And it was geared towards primarily, again, university students, because that was kind of the people who were the customers at the time. And yet the dream was big, right? But it was big, very big, and very ambitious within the constraints of having one unique product, right?
Yes.
And so again, the conversations, I think that what were the most important things in them were finding this very, very kernel that kind of encapsulates everything that they were talking about, from who they were, what they were trying to do, what were their aspirations, right? The big dreams. Also, what was the product that they were creating, but not just the product itself, but what was kind of the value and perhaps the most important essence behind all of those things. Because when you're talking about brand is a big thing. It encompasses a lot of different disciplines, right? It can be really, really big. But when you're talking about logo design, it's kind of, and one of the reasons why I love it so much is that it's a distillation of these really complex ideas into a very, very small mark, right? That hopefully kind of holds within it all of that, right? So that when you then interact with it, of course, each person adds whatever their experience is with the brand to it, but it continues to serve, right? So I think that what was kind of in hindsight, looking back now at where Google was at the time where they decided to change the logo is 15 years later, when they were hundreds of thousands of employees, global company, and hundreds, if not close to thousands of products, right? So the fact that it continued to serve for such a long time kind of speaks to the importance of understanding kind of what is that essence, right? When you go about designing something like that.
And why the typography and the rainbow looking colors, which was quite innovative back then?
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that was, was really clear that, and they articulated it again, going at how important it is when you're speaking to your clients that you, as a designer, should be a facilitator to allow them to articulate things that perhaps they haven't quite articulated it yet. But it became really clear that they didn't want to create a company that was like any other company, right? So it needed to be something completely different. And so let's take three things that were perhaps kind of the fundamentals, right? The one thing is we are going into a new technology, right? And we know that, typography or writing systems always evolve with new technologies, right? We had cursive when pen quills were introduced. And so how do you create typography for this new technology that actually, in Adobe, you have Bezier curves and you can have things that are really smooth, but on the screen, it's pixelated. And in those days, we didn't have the kinds of resolutions that we have today. So you have technology on one side that influences typography. On the other hand, you have this idea that a lot of people, and the algorithm was built upon this idea that you have a lot of users, because the more users you have, the more you can validate that the results you get are the results you're looking for. Right at the beginning, they were so cocky. They had this little button, "Are you feeling lucky?" Right, so they would give you the answer, right, which is kind of cute. But here's the thing: so if people are not using the internet, why not? Is because they were afraid of this new technology, right? So as you grow older and kind of set in your ways, and you're not looking to explore new things or new ideas, right? Then this going back to when is it that you are curious and playful and willing to fail, right? Childhood, right? You fall down, you get up, not big whoop, right? So this idea of play became kind of another fundamental here. Now, if you're talking about play, and you're talking about the algorithm, right? So the algorithm is based on a very simple system of zeros and ones. There's two elements from which you create a myriad, millions and bazillions of possibilities, right? If you think about child play at that time, child play was very much associated with the primary colors. Primary colors, blue, red, and yellow, are the basis of the entire color spectrum. So here are three elements that, upon combining, and even in the screen, it's a different, right? You have RGB, red, green, and blue, but still three elements that you create a multitude, right? An infinite amount of things. So these things started coming together, right? This idea that primary colors are associated with play, are associated with curiosity, right? Are associated with not being stodgy. I think that they really felt that companies, the big companies, one of the things that they had is once they had a logo, you don't touch it, you don't do anything to it, right? And with Google started with this whole idea of having the doodles, right? That you can create a million different things using the logo. So going back to typography, I was looking for something. My thought has always been that search is this point in time where the past and the future meet, right? Because you are today looking to the past to find a solution for something that you're going to do tomorrow, right? So if you think about the evolution of typography, I was really looking for a typeface that was very heavily based on the history of the development of typography, right? But was also a modern font. Also thinking about these doodles, how can you how can you find a typeface that has each letter has a distinct element that you can then build upon it, right? So I was looking for something like that. And I ended up finding a font, Catol, that had a lot of these elements, particularly because we were going with the logo that was using only the letters that are in the Google name, right? Google. So I needed also to find a font in which these particular letters were unique, right? So the capital G, the lowercase g, the very long L, those were things that were incredibly unique. And the combination, then does it create, is it balance, is aesthetically pleasing, all of those things later on that you have to think about. But the important things are all the things that are behind that, right? So then when you start putting those things together, I modified the fonts a little bit so that, again, there was something that was unique to Google. And then you start thinking about, well, when you go in and search, I was thinking about the old days, right? When you went to encyclopedias and you were looking for something, let's say you're looking for, I don't know, a parakeet, right? And you open the page and next to parakeet, there is a parachute, right? Has nothing to do with the parakeet, but then you are really interested in parachute, and that's where you go and you start kind of going the rabbit hole. So this idea that there is serendipity and there are things that happen that are unexpected. So when taking those primary colors into the typography, let's not put them in the order that they appear in the color wheel. So that's how the order of the colors were created. Big answer. Sorry, long, but
To a logo. Yeah, but it gives us an idea of how much details and how much thinking goes into one piece like that. How did that change your career after that? Because people, I mean, I think Google caught up pretty quick after you did that, right? So did you get a bunch of other opportunities after that?
No, actually, it was really interesting because for 10 years, I continued to do work. I had a lot of clients. I was doing a lot of things here. Thank God for Silicon Valley and all the companies that that come out of here, and even some companies abroad. But it was at the 10th anniversary of Google, when Google was already a verb, right? When it had actually kind of it became ubiquitous. And a lot of people started on the 10th anniversary of Google to write articles about it. And as part of the history of the of Google as a company, there was also an interest in the logo itself. And that's how I was approached by a lot of different publications to talk about it. And it was only after that, because then the reach was a lot larger, that a lot of people, and even people that were really close to me, they were super surprised that I was the one that had designed the Google logo. Because until that point in my portfolio, or when I presented to clients the kinds of, the breadth of work that I've done, Google was one of, it was not the, right? And in some ways, post the 10th anniversary of Google, then it almost became, in some ways, the thing that new clients were kind of hang up on, because they would say, this is what they want. But when they said this is what they want, is not the thought process and the depth of the research and the ideating and the conversations. They wanted a logo that looked exactly like that, right? And so the conversations then I needed to kind of go back and kind of really put together a very clear kind of mapping of what the process is between a designer and a client, so that they would get a logo that would have the same kind of longevity and perhaps the same kind of impact, that doesn't necessarily need to look exactly like the Google logo,
Right.
which kind of defeats the purpose. But
and nowadays, how do you balance your time between, doing design works for clients, art? You have an art gallery, which is pretty cool. You have playing cards as well. How do you balance your time between all of that?
I try. So these days, I'm actually trying to carve a lot more time to do art, uh, and to kind of delve into things that I'm interested outside of the realm of design, right? So whether it is honing all my language skills, or again, doing my martial arts, or doing art and really exploring new things. I think that for me right now, this feels like it's the path for much more growth. I've always been somebody who's interested in a lot of different things and interested in learning new things. And right now, with the new technologies, I want to experiment, right? And I have I'm really lucky in the sense that I have the luxury that I can carve the time out to do these kinds of experiments with all of these new technologies and new mediums, and be able to do that in a way that it will enrich my toolbox. And hopefully I'll be able to do great things with it. But the idea right now is just being in the process of learning and discovery.
Love that. Yeah, it's very multifaceted, and I can picture that as a flow state. Last question, you mentioned like 40 years in Aikido. Like, what has that taught you? Discipline, flow state, it's kept you in shape. What have you learned from that beautiful martial art?
I think for me, and perhaps 40, it's 30 something, but 40 is getting there. But I think that what I've taken away from it the most is, Aikido is based on this idea that you need to have harmonious encounters, right? So the first thing is that you do not, if force is applied to you, you don't react with force. So it's kind of the opposite of Newtonian, physics. So the idea here is, how do you center yourself in a way that you can react calmly and appropriately. So, for example, when you train in Aikido, because it's not a competitive art, so the way you train with people that are in your own rank, you train with people that are above your rank and sometimes way above and way below. You train with beginners. And when you train with beginners, for example, they have no idea of how strong they are. They can't move necessarily in a way that it is good for them, right? And they may, or if you train with children, right, they come ramming at you and you can't just throw them because that's dangerous to them. So being always aware of how can you be really, and you have to be in the moment, right? But be in the moment, and in some ways be in your body, but being kind of with the larger picture, and what are the things that you need to do in order that the outcome is going to be a positive one, right? You want them, even when you throw people really really hard. For me, the great thing is when they come out of that feeling like, how did that happen, and isn't that great, because it feels great on my body, right? So those things, I think that are really important, because my job, regardless of whether I'm creating art or whether I am speaking with people in many languages or what I am working, it's all about how you deal with the other person who comes in with perhaps had a bad day or has a lot of problems, has no time, right? So how can you deal with that in a way that at the end of this encounter, as short as it may be, it leaves both of you with the sense that this was a worthwhile encounter. So I think that for me, that's kind of the most important thing, and that's one of the reasons why I stick around for such a long time.
Love it. Ruth, thanks so much. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, if they're interested in the design part, they can go to kedardesigns.com. If they are interested to see what it is that I'm doing with my art, is ruthkedar.com. You can find me on all the socials. I'm always really happy to talk to people. If you have questions or if you want, some advice, I might not get back to you right away, but I will, and I try to be really thoughtful. So we'd love to hear from you.
That was Ruth Kedar from Kedar